You'd think she'd want to move. Who wants to die in a place that smells like old tea and mildew? That was my daughter-in-law's voice, just beyond the kitchen wall. Clear, sharp, coded in the kind of politeness that always made me feel like a charity case. She built her life here, my son replied, low and unsure. But not unsure enough. Then came her sigh. We'll talk to her tonight. It's time. I stood by the sink, my hands wet, the tea towel crumpled in my fingers. Outside, the maples were turning gold, and the wind tapped politely on the window pane, as if asking permission to rattle what was left of my peace. They thought I couldn't hear, that I was too slow, too soft, too old. I'd raised that boy with scuffed knees and a crooked smile. Built this house with my husband, beam by beam, paycheck by paycheck. Every inch of it bore the imprint of our hands, and now they wanted me out. Out of the blue chair, the kitchen, the life I had made. That evening, they came with cake. Homemade, too sweet. Carla sat across from me with that nurse's smile she'd perfected. My son, Michael, hovered behind her, eyes darting like a man trying to escape a conversation he'd already started. We were thinking, she said, slicing the cake too neatly. This house is lovely, but it's so much work. Maybe it's time to think about somewhere easier. I smiled. That old kind of smile, the kind women wear like armor. Is it? I asked. Seems like it's you who's tired of visiting, not me who's tired of living here. Michael winced. We only want what's best, he mumbled. I let the silence stretch. Let them feel it. What's best? I repeated. How generous. The next morning, the plumber came. A man I'd never seen before, tall and brisk with clean boots. Said the water heater needed inspecting. Carla fluttered around, saying something about preventative maintenance. I nodded, but I didn't miss the way she stood between me and the hallway while the man made his way downstairs. After he left, the basement door creaked closed behind him and locked. Oh, it's just stuck, Carla said, laughing too brightly. Old hinges. We'll get it fixed tomorrow. But I saw the key in her hand. That night, I sat in the blue chair by the cold fireplace. The house felt different. Not haunted, just claimed. The kind of quiet that comes when something's been taken without asking. I brewed a single cup of tea and thought about the safe in the basement. The one they'd probably forgotten was mine. Built into the concrete, hidden behind old shelving. My husband put it there the year Michael was born. It's not for the money, he said. It's for what matters. What matters? I remembered the combination like I remembered the sound of his laugh. 10-3-18, our anniversary. Upstairs, I heard them talking again. Soft. Urgent. She'll come around, Carla said. It's for her own good. Michael said nothing. I knew that silence. I'd heard it when his father was dying. The kind of silence that meant, let someone else decide. I'll just nod. I took another sip of tea, let it settle on my tongue. The cup warmed my palms, but I was already cold. The next morning, the lock on the basement was changed. A keypad now. Carla offered no explanation, just a smile and a tap on my shoulder. We're just making a few upgrades, Mom. Don't worry. She'd started calling me Mom again. Last time she did, that was when she wanted money for the sunroom. I nodded. I didn't ask questions. But I started counting steps, watching routines, and waiting. Not with fear, with clarity. You see, they thought the house made me fragile, but they forgot. I made this house. The morning sun slid through the curtains in lines, like quiet bars across the floor. I stayed in bed longer than usual, pretending to be stiff, slow, more tired than I really was. Let them think I was fading. It made them careless. By the time I shuffled into the kitchen, Carla was already in her yoga gear, flipping through her phone like it might suddenly whisper purpose into her life. Michael stood by the new keypad at the top of the basement stairs, tapping something in. He glanced at me, then back at the numbers. The beep of the lock disengaging was too loud in the hush of morning. I poured my tea slowly. 1 bag, 1 sugar, no milk. The same way I'd made it since 1969. New lock? I asked, not looking up. Michael flinched, just a little. Oh, yeah, it's temporary, for safety. Whose? He didn't answer. Carla piped up, cheerful as paint fumes. There was a break-in down the street last week, remember? It's just a precaution, and we're keeping tools down there. Don't want accidents. I nodded, stirred my tea without drinking it. Good to know I'm safer in my own home. The house was too quiet. I could feel the shift in air, the echo of something missing. My keys were gone from the hook. The drawer where I kept the little box of old checks was locked. They weren't trying to help me. They were preparing something. Something they didn't want me interrupting. That evening, Carla cooked dinner for the first time in weeks. Something with lemon and herbs and too much salt. She set the table with cloth napkins and real plates, the ones we only used for guests. Or guilt. Michael poured wine. To your health, he said. I raised my glass, watched them over the rim. Did the plumber fix the water heater? I asked. Carla smiled too quickly. Oh, yes, all sorted. Strange, I said. I didn't hear him leave. Neither of them spoke. That night, I walked the house in slippers, the kind that make no sound. Checked windows, doors, the little gaps they'd forgotten to close. The keypad on the basement glowed faintly green. I tried 1, 2, 3, 4. Nothing. Of course. In the laundry room, I found the box of my old clothes Carla had accidentally packed up last winter. She'd said the attic was too crowded. I guess now I knew why. In the bottom of the box, wrapped in a soft shawl, was the flashlight I'd bought years ago after the power went out for 3 days. Still worked. A good sign. I opened the back door. The wind smelled like damp leaves and wood smoke. I breathed it in deep. Let them think I was slow. Let them think I was tired. Let them think I was theirs to manage. The next morning, they told me the doctor was coming. A home visit, Carla said. Just to check in. We've been worried. I raised an eyebrow. Worried about what? Oh, you know, she said, her smile tight. Memory, judgment, all that stuff. I looked at Michael, but he was busy adjusting the thermostat. So that was it. They weren't just trying to nudge me into a condo. They were trying to declare me incapable. I went back to my room and closed the door. Then I pulled the small suitcase from the closet. Not to pack, just to touch it. Feel the weight. Remember what it meant to have a choice. I wouldn't run yet, but I would be ready. Because the basement wasn't theirs. Not the old shelves. Not the rusting tools. Not the safe. They'd forgotten that part. They'd forgotten I still had the key. I woke to voices. Not the usual muffled morning noise of coffee and clattering dishes. This was sharper, hushed, close. My room, still dark but for the faint gray of early dawn, caught every syllable like an eavesdropper. She's not going to fight it, Carla said. Her voice carried through the hallway, just outside my door. It's too late for that now. Once Dr. Hill files the assessment, the papers are already halfway done. You sure? Michael whispered. She's still sharp. You heard her yesterday. A pause, then the sound of Carla's sigh, patient, superior. She's tired, alone. She needs care. And you need to stop second-guessing everything. Do you want the house or not? Silence. And then Carla, again, but this time, laughing. Let's just keep her comfortable. Lock her down there if we have to. What's she gonna do? Climb out a window? Their footsteps faded. I lay still, breath caught somewhere in the middle of my chest. The blanket was too heavy, the air too thin. Lock her down there. As if I were a drawer. As if I hadn't built the shelves, scrubbed the tile, sealed the windows, paid every damn tax bill for 45 years. By the time I rose, the house had already shifted into its morning charade. Bacon on the stove, the news on low volume, Carla humming out of tune. I stepped into the kitchen, quiet. "Morning, Mom," she said, bright as an infomercial. "We were thinking, could you help us sort the boxes downstairs today? Just the old ones. Michael's back's been acting up." I looked at her. No blink, no smile. Just enough pause to let her feel I'd heard the truth earlier. "Sure," I said. She smiled wider, as if I'd passed a test she didn't know I was grading. Michael avoided my eyes. She gave me a flashlight. "Just until we get a bulb fixed." Of course. That bulb had worked yesterday. I took the light, walked to the basement door, waited. She typed the code into the keypad. 42622. I watched it carefully. Easy enough. The door clicked. I stepped inside. The basement always smelled of earth and rain, honest smells. Not like Carla's lavender floor cleaner or Michael's department store cologne. The flashlight beam flicked across the room, brushing past the old workbench, the shelves where we once kept preserves, the pile of forgotten decorations from holidays that no longer mattered. I let the door close behind me. It clicked louder than I expected. I walked past the water heater, new, apparently, and toward the far wall. The light flickered once. I tapped it. It steadied. The safe was still there, old, square, iron gray, half covered in a sheet that had yellowed with time. I knelt slowly. My knees groaned. My hands didn't. The dial was cold, comforting. My fingers remembered the turn, right to 10, left past 10 to 3, right to 18. Click. The hinges stuck slightly, then gave. Inside, the envelope was exactly where it had always been, the one he'd left. My husband. Tucked inside the safe on the day he told me, in case things ever get complicated. Inside it, a bank statement from a private account I hadn't touched in years. The deed to the house, in my name only. Our marriage license. And a note in his handwriting. If they forget who you are, remind them. Beneath it all, in a small leather pouch, the key to the deposit box, the one no one but me knew about. I sat back on the floor, let the flashlight rest beside me. Upstairs, footsteps passed, then laughter. I held the envelope tighter. They'd built a plan around my silence, but I still had a voice and a basement full of truth. They hadn't been down here in years. Not really. They'd thrown things, stacked boxes, sent the plumber, sure. But none of them had ever looked closely. Not like I had, 100 times before. The basement was where we kept what we couldn't bear to throw away, and what we were afraid to keep upstairs. I sat cross-legged on the concrete floor with the flashlight balanced on an old paint can. The safe lay open beside me. The air was cold, but my palms were warm from holding the envelope. I pulled out the contents one by one, laying them in a neat row like pieces on a game board. Deed, bank account, marriage license, life insurance. A faded photo of me and Robert at the front steps, his arms slung loose around my shoulder, both of us squinting into the sun, laughing at something the photographer had said. I must have been 35. God, my hair. They thought the house was theirs. They thought I didn't know how signatures worked or what joint tenancy meant. But Robert had been smart, careful, protective in ways I hadn't appreciated fully until now. When he bought the place from his uncle, he kept the title in my name. Said it was insurance. Men die sooner, he told me once, over coffee. I'd rather you own the roof over your head than have to ask anyone for it. I'd called him paranoid at the time. Now I called him right. The flashlight dimmed for a second, the battery warning me to hurry. I took out the battery pack and flipped them, just enough to squeeze a bit more time, a trick I learned during hurricane season years ago. In the corner of the safe was a rusted tin box, one of the old biscuit tins with the painted flowers on top. I almost didn't recognize it. Inside, keys. Old car keys, keys to the church, the shed, and one brass one I didn't know. Taped to the inside of the lid was a slip of paper. P.O. Box 119, still active. Keep the lease paid. R. I sat back. The P.O. box. I remembered going there with him once years ago when he said he had something personal to mail. After he died, I assumed it had lapsed, but the box number was familiar. I'd kept up the small payments without thinking, like paying for the plot at the cemetery. I looked around the basement. Everything suddenly looked different. Not like junk, like preparation. The folded suitcase in the corner, the fireproof lockbox with our old IDs, the metal cabinet that used to hold paints but now held, yes, stacks of envelopes labeled in Robert's tidy hand. Property tax 2015-2022. Bank copies 4L. They'd locked me in the wrong room. Above me, muffled footsteps. The rhythm of two people moving at ease, not expecting resistance. A pen clanged. Carla laughing again. She always laughed louder when she was hiding something. I moved quickly now, organizing. The marriage license, the deed, and the bank statement went into the lockbox. So did the brass key. I took out the suitcase and laid it open on the table. Still solid, still with the tag from our trip to Savannah in '96. From a shelf, I pulled the sweater I'd stored for winters. Deep green wool, too warm for upstairs, but perfect for travel. And under it, a shoebox with my old leather wallet and a burner phone Robert had given me the year before he died. Just in case you ever want to leave town without telling anyone. I'd laughed. Now I held the phone in my hands. It powered on after a moment, half charged. There were no texts, no calls, just a wallpaper photo of Robert in his flannel shirt, smiling crookedly. I hadn't realized how much I missed that expression. Not until I saw it again, glowing faintly in the dark. In the far corner, beneath a tarp, I found what I hadn't known I was hoping for. The cash tin, still heavy. Inside, $20, $50, and $100 bills in banded stacks, wrapped in rubber bands gone soft with age. Robert's pension plan, he used to call it, just in case. Always just in case. And now, just in time. They'd locked the door. But they'd forgotten the basement window. They'd forgotten the woman who'd laid this foundation with her own hands. They'd forgotten who the house belonged to. They'd forgotten me. There were dozens of them, some in envelopes, others loose leaf and folded into thirds, tucked in an old biscuit tin between the holiday wreaths and the toolbox. Letters I'd written to Robert in the years after he died. I don't remember putting them there, but I remember writing everyone. I didn't keep a diary. I never saw the point of talking to a page that wouldn't talk back. But Robert, he always listened, even after he was gone. So when the house got too quiet, or the news too loud, or my hands too still, I wrote to him. I opened the topmost letter. It was dated 6 years ago, the week Michael and Carla first mentioned downsizing. Robert, Michael says I should consider a retirement village. Says it like he's talking about brunch. Carla calls it right-sizing, which is what people say when they're trying to shrink your life without sounding cruel. You'd hate it. Those beige carpets and scheduled socials. They don't know me, love. Not really. I miss you. I ran my fingers across the ink. I remembered how the pen skipped that day, how my eyes burned from holding back tears. I opened another. It's Christmas Eve. They didn't come. Said the roads were too icy, but Rebecca posted photos from the mall. I made stuffing anyway, out of habit. The house smells like you liked it, sage and cinnamon and something burning slightly. I left your chair at the table. Just one more year, I told myself. Just one more. That one, I folded slowly. The paper was soft at the creases like it had been opened and closed too many times. Maybe I'd read it more than I meant to. The last one was undated. Just my handwriting, larger than usual, like I'd been trying to shout into silence. They want the house, not the stories in it. Not the dinners, the scraped knees, the sleepless nights. Just the square footage, the value, the equity. They see me as a placeholder, an obstacle between them and what they think they deserve. You'd tell me to stand up straight. I'm trying. God, I'm trying. I folded them all and tied them with a ribbon I found in the drawer next to the fuses. Gold, crinkled. From one of the last presents he ever wrapped. Then I placed the bundle back in the biscuit tin and slid it onto the top shelf behind a stack of old curtains. I wouldn't take them with me. They belonged here, with the walls that had heard me cry, with the pipes that had creaked through every sleepless night. This house held my sorrow, yes, but it also held my voice, and I was done whispering. I took the cash, the documents, the phone, and the key. I packed the green sweater, the lockbox, a change of clothes, a photo of Robert, and my will. It wasn't dramatic. No shaking hands, no quivering breath, just stillness, quiet certainty, like packing for a trip I'd known was coming, even if I didn't know when. At the bottom of the suitcase, I slipped in a note. Not for them to find right away, no. For later, when they came looking. To Michael and Carla, this house is not yours. It never was. Neither was I. You locked the wrong door. You built your life on the assumption I wouldn't notice. I did. And now I'm gone. L. I set the suitcase beside the basement window, opened it gently. The latch still worked. The glass was cold. Outside, the wind had picked up, scattering leaves across the lawn like warnings. I stood a while in the dark, listening to the hum of the water heater, the ticking pipes, the muffled thump of footsteps above me. Then, I reached for the small step stool Robert had built when I was pregnant with Michael, carved initials still visible beneath the paint. And for the first time in a long time, I climbed. The step stool held steady beneath me, creaking just once as I hoisted the suitcase onto the ledge of the basement window. The frame groaned when I pushed it open, swollen from age and weather, but not locked. They hadn't bothered. The air outside hit me like a splash of cold water, sharp, earthy, clean. I hadn't realized how stale the house had become. Or maybe it wasn't the air. Maybe it was me, finally remembering what breath should feel like. I knelt slowly, testing the strength of my arms, and pushed the suitcase through the window. It landed on the mulch below with a dull thud. I followed carefully, one leg out, then the other, my palms gripping the stone edge like I was crawling back into myself. The yard was still. The neighbor's dog barked once in the distance. Lights glowed from inside the house, soft and oblivious. Carla was probably finishing her glass of wine, telling Michael for the third time how hard this has been on all of us. They wouldn't notice my absence until morning. And even then, they'd assume I'd wandered off. Confused? Lost? They'd underestimate me one last time. I crouched in the shadow of the bushes, pulled my coat tight, and made my way along the side of the house toward the garage. The key was still under the ceramic frog, the one Robert bought as a joke. Ugly thing, chipped now, but loyal. The door creaked when I opened it. I froze. No movement inside. In the far corner beneath a tarp sat my old bike. Not the one Carla bought to look casual at the farmer's market, but my real one. The one Robert fixed every spring. The one I rode before knees and years got the better of me. I didn't need it tonight. What I needed was in the cabinet above it. The fireproof box. Another of Robert's just-in-case ideas. Inside, my birth certificate, his death certificate, the title to the old camper we sold years ago and tucked in a plastic sleeve, the number of a lawyer we'd met just once, a quiet man with a slow voice and a sharp mind. "You'll know if you ever need him," Robert had said. I knew now. I stuffed the documents into the side pocket of my suitcase, closed the garage, walked down the driveway slow, steady, like any neighbor taking a late stroll. No rush, no drama. At the corner of the block, I stopped and turned. The house stood quiet. No alarms, no lights flipping on, just shadows behind curtains. I thought I might feel something. Grief, regret, fear? But there was only a dull ache in my knees and a tight, fierce calm in my chest. I flagged down a cab with a wave. The driver was young, too distracted to ask questions. I gave him the address of the motel near the train station, the one with paper-thin walls and flickering signs. Perfect for disappearing quietly. As we drove, I watched the streets roll by. The florist I used to visit. The church where Michael was baptized. The diner where Robert and I shared pie on Sundays. Familiar places that now looked like memories I'd already let go of. When we stopped, I paid in cash. No names, no card, just a nod and a thank you. Inside the motel room, the air was cold. The sheets smelled like bleach. The lamp buzzed faintly when I turned it on. But it was mine, for tonight, at least. I set the suitcase on the bed and opened the lockbox. The documents were still there. I picked up the phone and dialed the number. It rang 3 times before a voice answered. "Whitaker and Lowry. I need to speak with Mr. Whitaker," I said. "May I ask who's calling?" "Tell him it's Lauren Blakely. Robert Blakely's widow. He'll remember." A pause. Then, "Please hold." I closed my eyes and waited. The walls buzzed, the light hummed, the world turned. Then his voice, older but still precise. "Mrs. Blakely." "I'm ready," I said, "to change everything." The motel room smelled like old carpet and lemon cleaner. I sat on the edge of the bed with the phone still in my hand, listening to the dial tone after Mr. Whitaker hung up. He hadn't asked many questions, just the necessary ones. He'd meet me tomorrow, noon sharp. He said he was glad I called. I believed him. The heater in the wall rattled to life. I hadn't even touched the thermostat. Maybe the room could sense I was cold. Or maybe Robert was still looking out for me in strange ways. I pulled my suitcase onto the bed and laid everything out. The deed, the bank statements, the letter from Robert, the key to the P.O. box, the cash, the burner phone. My new will would need copies of everything. No loose ends. I wasn't scared anymore. I wasn't even angry, just clear. They thought I wouldn't leave. They thought I couldn't. What they forgot was that I had been planning my own escape since the first time Carla called me fragile in that syrupy voice of hers. Since Michael started answering my questions with, "Don't worry about it, Mom." Since they began speaking to each other in front of me like I wasn't even in the room. They forgot who I was before I was his mother, her mother-in-law, their dependent. They forgot I was a woman who built a home from nothing, who ran a kitchen like a military operation and a budget like a business, who buried her husband without crumbling and kept a whole life upright while the foundation cracked beneath her. They forgot I could still think, plan, move. They locked a door and called it kindness. They shut off my access to the bank, whispered behind my back, brought a doctor to my kitchen table and called it care. But what they really did was underestimate the one person in that house who remembered every single drawer, every creaking floorboard, every hiding place built by love, not greed. I stood up, stretched. My body ached, but it was a good ache, the kind that tells you you've done something that matters. I flipped the burner phone open again, scrolled to the contact marked simply E. Eloise. Not my granddaughter. Not in this version. This was Eleanor, my oldest friend, the one who lived 2 states over. The one who'd once said, "If you ever need to disappear for a while, my guest room has your name on it." I dialed. It rang twice. "Lauren?" she answered, her voice warm with surprise and caution. "Is everything—" "I'm cashing in that offer," I said. "Do you still have that guest room?" A pause. "Of course I do," she said. "And I just made chili." We laughed. After we hung up, I sent one message from the burner phone. Just one. To Carla and Michael. Message: I see you've noticed the silence. No, I haven't wandered off. No, you don't need to file a report. Everything you left locked behind you is exactly where you left it, except the money, and the house, and me. Then I turned the phone off. Let them stew. Let them panic. Let them wonder how long I'd been awake while they were planning. Outside, the sky had begun to lighten. A train horn echoed in the distance. Soon, I'd be gone from this town. Not hidden, not running, just choosing. The suitcase was packed again. The taxi to the lawyer's office booked for the morning. The transfer forms in order. The trust for the local women's shelter drafted on paper and ready for signature. They forgot I could write my own ending. And I had. I passed the house one last time. Not up close, just from the corner, across the street, half shadowed by the hedges. The early morning sun fell soft across the porch, lighting up the spot where the wicker swing used to hang. Michael took it down last year, said it was rotting, though it hadn't creaked once in the breeze. I think Carla thought it looked too rustic. Funny thing was, that swing had lasted longer than most of their convictions. From where I stood, I could see the outline of the living room through the gauzy curtains. My blue chair was still there, the one Carla once said made the room feel outdated. But she never got rid of it. She just moved it to a corner, turned it away from the window. A prop. Like I had become. I looked at the front steps. My garden gloves were probably still tucked behind the planter. The climbing rose I'd coaxed for 12 years was trimmed back too far, its vines raw and unsure. The garden path, paved in stone by Robert's own hands, had weeds pushing through the cracks. They didn't know how to care for it. They didn't know how to care for much. I didn't cry. I thought maybe I would. But I didn't. The tears had dried up somewhere between the safe and the motel, replaced by something steadier. Something older than grief. Resolve. I turned and walked the long way around, cutting through the side street where the big maple trees lined the curb like watchmen. It was the same path Robert and I had taken when we brought Michael home from the hospital. I remember we carried him in one of those padded car seats, and I was terrified I'd trip on the step. I didn't. I never did. I stayed upright through the crying, the teenage tantrums, the missed calls, the silent birthdays, the careful betrayals. I stayed upright through losing Robert, and then, slowly, losing Michael, too. They thought I was stuck here, that if they boxed me in gently enough, patted the edges, smiled wide enough, I wouldn't notice that they were emptying me out, piece by piece. But I noticed. I noticed everything. At the corner, I passed the community bulletin board. Taped in the center was a flyer for Wilmot Senior Living. Pictures of smiling women in pastel sweaters holding mugs, fake fireplaces flickering in the background. I wondered if Carla had picked up the brochure herself. "You'll love it, Mom," she'd said a week ago, sliding the pamphlet across the table with her coffee. "They do crafts. There's a courtyard." I'd stared at the paper without blinking. "I already have a courtyard," I said. She laughed, as if I'd missed the point. But I hadn't. They wanted a life for me that was small, safe, and convenient. For them. Not for me. Never for me. At the train station, I bought a one-way ticket. Paid in cash. No one asked questions. The platform was nearly empty. A boy in a hoodie, a woman with a stroller, a man in a suit yawning into his phone. No one looked at me. That was the best part. I wasn't Mom. I wasn't Nana. I wasn't that poor old woman who got locked downstairs. I was just a woman with a suitcase, going somewhere she chose. I sat on the bench and closed my eyes. In my mind, I walked the garden path again, but not as it looked now. As it was then. Freshly laid stones, soft dirt beneath my nails, Robert wiping sweat from his brow with the back of his hand and grinning like a fool. "Looks good, doesn't it?" he said, squinting at the flower beds. I'd nodded. "Looks like home." He wrapped his arm around my waist and pulled me close. "Then let's make sure it stays yours." I opened my eyes. The train had arrived. It was time. The room was cheap, but clean. Pale yellow curtains fluttered against a slightly cracked window. A single bed, a chipped desk, a television that only showed static unless you jiggled the cable just right. It was perfect. I'd checked in under a name Robert once joked about giving a dog. Miss Millie Townsend. I used it now not because I was hiding, but because I didn't owe anyone my name for a little while. The suitcase sat open on the bed. Neat. Organized. Every item in it was a decision. I boiled water in the little coffee pot and poured it over one of the tea bags I'd packed, the good kind from the grocery store downtown that Carla always said was too bitter. Robert loved it. I sat at the desk and opened the burner phone. It had 1 bar of signal. Enough. I dialed Eleanor. She answered on the second ring. "Lauren." "Still me," I said, smiling, "and still in one piece." "You sound calm, too calm," she said. "Tell me everything." So I did. Not all the details, they weren't important. Not to her. Just the broad strokes, the safe, the lock, the window, the money, the silence, the note I'd left behind. And the will I intended to rewrite. When I finished, she didn't speak right away. Then, "I never liked her." I laughed. "You never said that." "Didn't have to. You were always giving them excuses, making them sound better than they were." "I wanted to believe they cared," I said. She sighed. "We all do, until it costs us too much." We stayed on the line, not saying much after that. It was enough just to know someone was on the other end. Someone who saw me before they called me old. After we hung up, I called Mr. Whitaker. He was already at his office, as promised. "I've drafted the paperwork," he said. "You just need to review and sign. Everything's in order." "And the trust?" He cleared his throat. "You want the full amount allocated?" "Yes," I said. "To the women's shelter, in Robert's name, and mine." "You understand it means your son won't inherit the estate?" "I understand," I said. "That's the idea." "Then it's your right," he replied. He wasn't shocked. That's what I appreciated about Mr. Whitaker. He didn't try to talk me out of my own mind. The ride to his office took 20 minutes. I watched the town pass by from the back seat of a taxi. Bookstores, parks, little diners that had stopped updating their menus in the 80s. It didn't look like a place I'd just left behind. It looked like a place I'd survived. Whitaker's office was small and warm. Mahogany desk, quiet lighting. He wore the same kind of tie Robert used to wear to church. Thin, burgundy, simple. We signed the trust paperwork first, then the will. Then he handed me a slim folder. "This is your legal statement of capacity," he said. "In case anyone tries to challenge what you've done, I had Dr. Myers review your records." I raised an eyebrow. "Carla brought in someone else." "She tried," he said. "But Dr. Myers outranks her man by 3 states and 2 degrees. I couldn't help the smile that tugged at my mouth. It wasn't about revenge. Not really. It was about being seen, heard, documented. Before I left, I handed him an envelope. "What's this?" he asked. "Post this in the paper," I said. "The classified section, next week." He opened it, read, and then looked at me. "You're sure?" "Quite." On the way back to the motel, I stopped at a diner for lunch. Sat by the window, ordered a BLT and hot soup. The waitress called me ma'am, like she meant it kindly. I ate slowly, savoring each bite like it was the first meal I'd had in years that wasn't cooked to please someone else's palate. Back in the room, I took off my shoes and lay on the bed. I didn't nap. I just stared at the ceiling, breathing, free. Mr. Whitaker's office was nothing like the cold, modern places Carla loved. No glass walls, no espresso machines hissing in corners, no fake plants in geometric vases. Just dark wood, heavy curtains, and the smell of paper that had been sitting undisturbed for decades. "I wasn't sure you'd really come," he said, motioning toward the leather chair across from his desk. "I wasn't sure I'd make it," I answered, easing myself down. "But here I am." He gave a tight smile and passed me a glass of water. "I reviewed everything you sent. The documents are strong. The title is clean. Your ownership is indisputable." I nodded. "Robert made sure of that." "Smart man," Whitaker said. He was, and suspicious by nature, which I used to think was irritating. I paused. Now I think it saved me. He flipped open a folder, his long fingers adjusting each paper like they were cards in a careful hand. "We've prepared a revocable trust. Everything in your name will transfer to it immediately. You're the trustee. The shelter is the beneficiary." "And Michael?" I asked. "What happens when he comes knocking?" Whitaker didn't hesitate. "He'll have no claim. Once it's signed, the assets are protected. Even if he contests the will later, the trust isn't part of the estate. He can fight smoke if he wants, but it won't get him $1. I breathed in through my nose, slow and even. "Good." He placed a pen on the desk and rotated the papers toward me. "Take your time," he said. I didn't need time. Each signature was a stone laid in a new path, one I'd build on my own, brick by honest brick. The way Robert and I used to fix the garden wall, carefully, steadily, no rush, no cracks. When I finished, he gathered the papers and placed them in a thick envelope. "You're now the trustee of the Lauren Blakely Foundation," he said, with a small, respectful nod. I almost laughed. It sounded like a library wing or a plaque on a bench. But it wasn't about legacy. Not really. It was about dignity. I took the envelope and set it carefully in my bag. Whitaker leaned back, watching me. "Do you mind if I ask you something personal?" I met his eyes. "Try me. Why the shelter?" I smiled. "I don't think women should ever have to knock twice for safety, or ask permission to feel human. And I don't think getting older should mean becoming invisible." He nodded slowly. "You've thought this through." "I had time," I said. "Locked in my own basement." That made him blink, but he didn't ask. Maybe he already knew. As I stood to leave, he handed me a business card. "In case you need anything else, or if anyone shows up making noise." "Let them knock," I said. "There's nothing left in that house they can take." He smiled at that. Outside, the sky was overcast, the air crisp. Autumn was curling its fingers around the town. I walked the 3 blocks to the post office, the sidewalk uneven in places. My legs ached, but I walked tall. At the counter, I handed the clerk the small brass key. He took it, disappeared, and returned with a thick manila envelope. The P.O. box. Still active, still private. Inside, a letter from Robert, handwritten, dated nearly a decade ago. If you're reading this, Lo, it means you remembered the key. I hope you did. I wasn't sure you'd ever need it, but I couldn't let the world get its hands on you without leaving something behind. Just in case. Always. Just in case. You're stronger than anyone realizes. Even you. Don't let them shrink you. Don't let them wrap you in cotton and call it love. You were never meant to be small. I folded the letter slowly with both hands. No tears. Just breath. Then I walked outside, back toward the motel, the letter warm in my coat pocket. The final piece was in place. They'd made their choices. Now I had made mine. The motel light flickered as I stepped inside, casting crooked shadows across the bedspread. I closed the door behind me and turned the lock. Not because I was scared, but because it felt good to decide who came in and who didn't. I took off my coat and laid the envelope from the lawyer on the bed. Then I sat down slowly, pressed my palms to my knees, and breathed. It was done. The will was rewritten. The trust was live. The house, the accounts, the insurance, everything was protected, and everything would go where I wanted, not where they assumed. For the first time in years, no one could speak for me. They'd thought I wouldn't notice the papers Michael kept safe, or the way Carla asked questions at the doctor's office like I wasn't in the room. They thought their quiet thefts, my keys, my mail, my autonomy, would pass without fight. But they'd mistaken patience for passivity. They'd mistaken a quiet woman for a powerless one. I opened my notebook and flipped to the page I'd labeled "For After." I wrote out clear instructions in careful script. Where the new will was held. What the trust covered. Who to contact when I passed. Then, at the bottom of the page, I wrote, "This is not revenge. This is release." The heater kicked on, humming low in the corner. I made myself a cup of tea and sat by the window. The motel backed onto a row of trees, just beyond the edge of town. In the fading light, I could see the shapes of leaves falling, catching in the wind like old thoughts. My old life wasn't far away, geographically, but emotionally, it felt like another country, another version of myself, one who waited for permission, one who believed her absence might matter to people who couldn't hear her voice while she was still in the room. I sipped the tea and thought of Robert, how he used to say, "Paper speaks louder than memories." He was right. Carla and Michael could twist stories, throw their hands up in feigned confusion. We were only trying to help. But the paper trail I'd left behind would speak with clarity. Every legal detail pointed to a single truth. I saw them. I heard them. And I acted. There would be no inheritance, no house to split, no savings to fight over, no tidy estate for Carla to quietly absorb into her next home renovation. Instead, there would be a plaque in the shelter's new wing, in honor of Lauren and Robert Blakely, for every woman who was told she owed more than she deserved. That was the line I'd asked Mr. Whitaker to include. They could tell whatever stories they wanted after I was gone, but they'd never own the truth. I set the teacup down and took out the burner phone one last time, powered it on, waited for the screen to flicker to life. 15 missed calls, 11 messages. The latest from Michael. "Mom, please, where are you? The police said they can't do anything if you left voluntarily. Just call. We're worried." Worried? They'd locked me in the basement. They'd called a doctor to declare me declining. They'd rewritten my reality to suit their comfort. Now they were worried. I deleted every message without reading the rest. Then I typed one reply. "You were never protecting me. You were preparing to live without me. Now you'll get your wish." I hit send. Then I powered the phone off for good and dropped it in the motel trash can. Gone. Like the future they'd planned for me. The one I never agreed to. I stood, stretched, and opened the window. The air was crisp, alive, full of motion. Outside, somewhere, my new life was waiting. I didn't know what it would look like yet. But I knew one thing. It would be mine. Carla noticed first. She came into the kitchen in her robe, expecting the usual. My silence at the table, my cup already steeping, the house pre-warmed by someone else's hands. But the kettle was cold. The light in the hallway still flicked the way it always did before I turned the switch twice. The chair I never moved from was empty. She called out once. Twice. Nothing. She tried to stay calm, I'm sure. Checked the rooms, opened the closets, called my name louder. Maybe she thought I'd fallen or wandered off. She probably already had her explanation rehearsed. Michael followed her down the hall, slower. Sleep still in his eyes, but dawning panic pulling at his steps. When they reached the basement door, they saw it. The keypad, the window, the suitcase gone, and the note. Folded neatly on the basement table, untouched except for my name written in my own hand. I can imagine how Michael read it aloud, voice shaking, not with fear, but with something older. Guilt, maybe? Or the uncomfortable realization that his mother had been watching him long before he started watching her. Carla would have stood in silence. She was always better at silence than apology. I didn't need to be there to know what they said next. They'd turn on each other first. You were supposed to be watching her. You said the door was secure. You told me she wouldn't understand. You told me it was best for her. They would say best like it was a fact, like it had weight, like it could excuse the slow theft of someone's life. They would call the police. They would be told, kindly, that no crime had been committed, that an adult woman, fully competent, had the right to walk out of her home, that no report could be filed for someone who had simply chosen a different address. They would try to access my accounts and find them empty. They would call the bank, ask for explanations. They would be told politely that no information could be shared. They would look for the will and find the old one gone. They would call the lawyer. And Mr. Whitaker, always so calm, would say, "I'm not at liberty to discuss that with you." They would sit at the kitchen table, the one I scrubbed every Saturday for 40 years, and realize that they had miscalculated something. Someone. Not a number, not a date, not a signature, but me. The person they thought they could manage. Quietly, softly, kindly. The person they thought they could turn into a box they checked, a room they cleaned, a liability they contained. I had left the door open on purpose. The basement window. The drawer with the garden gloves. The way I didn't fight back when they started making decisions around me. I wanted them to believe it. All of it. Because sometimes, when people think you're gone, they stop hiding. And when they stop hiding, they give you everything you need to walk away clean. They'd never get the story right. Not fully. Maybe they'd say I ran, that I was confused, that grief finally caught up with me. But I didn't run. I walked. Out the door, into the garden, down the same path Robert laid stone by stone. And when I reached the street, I didn't look back. Because I didn't leave my home. I took it with me. The newspaper came out on a Thursday. Second section, bottom half of the page, under the classifieds and above the obituaries. No color, no headline, just a block of text and a small signature. Lauren B. It wasn't a tell-all. I didn't name names. I didn't air the details of the basement, or the code on the keypad, or the way my own child had begun referring to me in the past tense while I was still in the room. I didn't need to. People aren't stupid. They know what it looks like when an elderly woman disappears with nothing but a suitcase and surfaces weeks later with a lawyer, a new will, and a foundation in her name. The letter read, "There comes a point in every woman's life when she realizes that silence isn't safety. It's surrender. I was silent for too long. I let people take over my calendar, my mail, my decisions. They called it help. They called it love. It looked like kindness from the outside. But I've learned that sometimes what they call help is really a slow erasure, a quiet theft. They move your teacups to higher shelves, call the doctor when you forget a name, speak to you in the third person while you're still breathing. This is not a complaint. This is a reminder. Old women are not relics. We are not children. We are not yours to arrange. If you are reading this and you feel the edges of your life being folded inward, I want you to know you are not imagining it. And it is not too late to unfold yourself. Your name still means something. Use it. Your voice still works. Speak. Your hands still hold power. Write, sign, pack, leave if you must. Stay if you choose. But whatever you do, let it be yours. Lauren B. The paper didn't comment, just printed it, but the phone lines did buzz. Not mine. I'd change the number. But Whitaker told me a few of his clients asked after me. Women in their 70s, 80s. A few men, too. Some had questions about trusts. Others just asked if it was real. It was, he told them. It is. Word spread like it always does in small towns. Through whispers at the grocery store, through knowing glances in the church foyer, through the long pause that comes before someone says, "I always wondered about that family." I didn't write the letter to shame anyone. I wrote it to warn them. Not about my son, not about my daughter-in-law, but about the slow unraveling of personhood that happens when you give up too much ground in the name of peace. Peace isn't always quiet. Sometimes it's a slammed door, a train ticket, a notarized form. The day after the letter ran, the shelter called. Not for clarification, not for confirmation. Just to say thank you. They'd received the first wire transfer. enough to build the expansion wing, enough to keep the night staff funded through winter, enough to give women like me, only younger, less resourced, less protected, a key they didn't have to return. "You changed more than a deed," the director said. "You gave us air." That's what I'd wanted. Not recognition, not revenge. Air. For women locked in rooms, basements, marriages, silences. Carla and Michael didn't call again. Whether out of shame, fear, or simply self-preservation, I didn't know. Didn't care. I'd taken back my life with no demand for theirs. They could have their story, whatever version made it easier to sleep at night. But mine? Mine was in the public record now. Ink on paper, filed, signed, witnessed, real. Not a whisper in the kitchen or a worried glance over teacups. A statement, and I didn't need their permission to make it. The guest room smelled like rosemary and old books. Eleanor had put fresh sheets on the bed and left a small lamp glowing in the corner, the kind with the pull chain and the faded shade. She didn't hover. She didn't ask too many questions. She simply opened her door and let me in. "You can stay as long as you want," she said, handing me a glass of water. "Or as little." I nodded, too tired to answer. The room had a window facing east. In the mornings, the sun came in soft and golden, lighting up the dust like confetti. I'd sit on the edge of the bed with my tea and just watch the day begin. No schedule, no questions, no one checking if I'd taken my pills or asking if I remembered the year. I remembered everything. I remembered the safe, the garden path, the way Carla said, "She's lucky we're here," like I was a burden someone had forced into her arms. I remembered how it felt to write that letter to the newspaper, how my hands trembled at first, then steadied, like they recognized what power felt like. I remembered Robert's laugh, his boots by the door, the way he used to say, "They'll all forget what you said. But they'll remember what you refused to accept." That guest room became a place of stillness, not hiding. I unpacked the suitcase slowly. I kept the lockbox beside the bed, not because I needed it nearby, but because it reminded me of the work I'd done to reclaim my name. Eleanor would knock every evening around 6, just once, before entering. "Dinner's ready," she'd say, simple as that. She made real food, the kind that didn't come frozen or labeled with heart healthy in fake concern. Chicken and rice, pot roast, blackberry cobbler that stained the dish and the tips of our fingers. We ate slow, without television or forced chatter. "You're quieter than you used to be," she said once. "I'm listening," I replied. "To what?" "The silence I used to be afraid of." We both laughed. One afternoon, while sorting through some boxes she kept in her spare closet, I found an old photo of us. Young, wind-blown, standing barefoot at a beach with our skirts hitched up and our mouths wide open in laughter. I must have been 24. Eleanor looked 17. "You kept this?" I asked, holding it up. "Of course," she said. "You looked free." "I was. You still are." It was strange how quickly my life shrank down to something that fit in 2 drawers and a nightstand. I didn't miss the house. Not really. The walls, the dishes, the linens. I'd kept those going out of habit, not love. The house had long since stopped being mine. What I missed were the parts they couldn't take, the feel of soil under my nails. Robert's voice when he read the Sunday paper aloud. The way I used to hum without realizing it while hanging laundry in the spring breeze. But even those memories felt less like loss and more like inheritance now. Things I'd carry forward, not backward. One evening, Eleanor brought out a bottle of wine she'd been saving since her divorce. "I thought we'd toast," she said, pouring 2 glasses. "To what?" I asked. "To women who don't ask permission." I lifted my glass. "To women who leave through the basement window," I said, and we both laughed so hard I nearly dropped the glass. That night, I wrote another letter. Not for publication, not for the lawyer. Just for myself. I am not a ghost in my own story. I am not a silent corner in someone else's house. I am not a relic, a patient, a sad story with too many prescriptions. I am a woman who noticed the lock, remembered the window, and climbed. I do not need their version of love. I have my own hands, and they still work. I have my own name, and it still carries weight. I have a future, and it belongs to me. I folded the letter and slipped it into my notebook, between pages filled with train times, legal notes, shelter plans, and scribbled memories. Eleanor peeked in a few minutes later. "You okay?" she asked. I looked up, smiled. "Better than I've been in years?" She nodded and closed the door gently. And for the first time in a very long time, I slept without waking. Not because I was safe, but because I knew I was the one who made it so. Before I left, I walked through every room of that house. Not just the basement, all of it. The bathroom where I nursed Michael through the flu. The kitchen drawer where I kept Robert's army tags. The closet shelf with the baby blanket. Carla pretended not to notice when she packed my winter coats. I took almost nothing. The lockbox, my documents, the letter Robert left behind, the photo of us by the garden path, and one small thing Carla had always hated, the ceramic bluebird from the windowsill. She said it was tacky, but Robert gave it to me the day we moved in. Said it was a symbol of peace, but only the kind you earn. That little bluebird sat in my suitcase, wrapped in a dish towel, while I rode the train out of town. Now it lives on the bedside table in Eleanor's guest room, just beside the lamp. Some nights, I catch the light glinting off its wing and feel something settle inside me. Not nostalgia, not sadness. Something steadier, like breath. It's not about the object. Not really. It's about what they didn't take from me. My memory. My ability to choose. My voice. They tried. They circled me gently, like decorators stripping a room. First the curtains, then the books, then the photographs on the wall. All in the name of improvement, efficiency, safety. But the last thing I took before I left was none of those things. It wasn't a paper or a password. It was my dignity. That's what I carried out through the basement window. And that's what I'll carry until the end. It's been 2 months now. The foundation is up and running. The check cleared. The new wing will be called the Blakely House. I asked them not to put a photo on the wall, just a single plaque, small and simple, by the door. For those who were told to shrink, may you always expand instead. Eleanor drives me to the shelter every Thursday. I sit with the women in the intake room, listen to stories I already know by heart. Not because I lived their lives, but because we all recognize the language of being made small. One woman, maybe 30, asked me why I did it, why I gave up everything, why I didn't just let them win. I told her, because they didn't ask. They assumed. And I've lived long enough to know the difference. She nodded, slow. Then hugged me so tightly I nearly lost my balance. They think we grow more fragile with age, that we forget how to act, how to stand, how to shout. But I didn't forget. I just waited until I had something worth shouting for. And when I did, it wasn't loud. It was steady. A signature. A door left open. A key turned in silence. I won't live forever. I know that. My bones remind me every morning. But I will live the rest of my life as someone awake. As someone who remembers how to walk out of a place that mistook her for furniture. Carla and Michael haven't reached out again. I don't expect they will. Maybe they're ashamed. Maybe they're afraid. Or maybe they're just confused that the woman they tried to put in a corner is now funding a shelter, writing articles, laughing with strangers over coffee in a kitchen they'll never visit. Whatever story they're telling about me now, it's theirs to carry. Not mine. Mine is already written, and it ends with a truth so simple it feels like breath. They locked the door, but I still had the key, and I used it.